Welcome to another Raven story. Here we are out in the desert. We're about 2 miles east of camp, and we're just about a half mile from one buck. This story is unbelievable. It starts with a phone call. A phone call from a person who says, hey, I've got 80 acres, we're in escrow, and but I don't know exactly where it's at. And I say to the person, I say, well, send me your coordinates. My son and I, we like to go ride the quad, and we got a little GPS unit, and we can find where your 80 acres are at. So for me, it's just an excuse to go ride the quad with Bodie. Well, they send the coordinates to us, and we head on out, and we start looking for it. When we're looking for these coordinates, we find it in a spot that as we put it, and we kind of marked off the four corners, we realize this is right next to where our junior high campout was. Just like a year before, we had decided that we wanted to do a junior high track. And in that junior high track, one of the things that would be the adventure was you would stay overnight out in the wilderness and you would cook your own breakfast. Nothing more adventurous than junior high guys fixing their own breakfast. And so we had picked this spot. We'd gone all over the desert and said, where would it be? It needs to be far away from camp, like out in the middle of nowhere, but it also needs to be close enough that we can get there fairly easily. So we picked a mesquite bush down in the river bottom. We said, this is our spot. I think this would be the perfect location. And that night, as we were sitting out there and I was with all the guys the first time we had done it, I thought to myself, wouldn't it be great if we owned property near here, if we could build near here? And when we were putting that thing together, we were about a mile, maybe a half a mile away from that mesquite bush. I told the person that we were talking with on this is a piece of property we would be interested in. Well, I told them a little bit about what we did here at Ironwood, and they're like, well, hey, you guys could buy this. I said, well, actually, we don't have much money. They didn't want much, $175 an acre, but it was 80 acres, and that was several $1,000s that we didn't have. But she was very excited about it. She said, no, I think you guys could purchase this. This could be yours. I said, well, you would go out of escrow for this? He said, oh yeah, that's just a land company. We would love for you to have it. The first donor that I talked with said, well, I'll be willing to help on just one condition. Now those can be kind of odd, one condition gifts, or like, you got to name it after my cat. And I wasn't sure if we wanted that condition. I said, well, what's your condition? They said, well, I will help with this project as long as I'm the only one who can buy it. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, that's a good deal. Well, yeah, we can do that. And so they committed to buy the entire piece of property. And so I got back on the phone with this lady that I've never met, and I said, we would like to buy that piece of property. And she's like, that's wonderful. I'll let the board know. She was actually part of a group of people who owned a whole bunch of property, and they were selling it. And so she took it back to that board, and that board says, well, why does that other company want it? Now, why do they want it? Is this some valuable piece of property? And she's like, no. It's not some value. It's just this group will use it better than that other group. And the board was like, you know what? We're gonna have to go look at it to make sure that it's not some really nice golf course property. And so we were like, oh man, we had the money and now we can't buy the property. So until they come look at it. So we waited and waited, and months went by, and finally the owners of the property flew into Daggett Airport and then drove out here. And then they got to Ironwood. We took them on a quick tour around the camp, and then we headed out to this 80 acres. Well, it took us quite some time, and on the way in a Jeep going through all the rough road, those guys finally realized we're not going to build a golf course here. That's not going to happen. They flew back home. The lady met them and said, so can we sell it to them? I said, I want to discuss this with the entire board. So they got everybody back together. The chairman of the board says, we went out to Ironwood. We saw the piece of property. I think that we should sell them the piece of property. But I don't want to sell it for what we were asking. I want to sell it for $1. Okay, so she calls me up. She's all excited. Sam, they want to sell this piece of property, and they want to sell it for $1. I'm like, oh, I can't believe this. Now, no joke. I am sitting in the parking lot of a dollar store when I get this call that says you're going to get 80 acres for $1. My wife comes back to the car and she's like got these bags and she's like, look what I got for $1. I said, no. You let me tell you what we got for $1. So we called back the donor. We said, you know what? I don't need all that money. I just need $1 for this property. Would it be possible for us to use that money to build a building and get everything set to go? And so he agreed, and we were set to go. We built a building. We had everything set to go. Mission team came out and built the whole thing, and we were all excited about it. This is amazing. God gave us a piece of property for like $0.0125 an acre. Well, after a year, we were working on some other projects, and a ranger shows up. He's got his little decal on the side, and he says, who's the owner of that? There's a little shack shed out and way, down in the river. And I said, oh, that's us. And he pulls out his map and he says, I don't think you've built in the right spot. I said, no. We have a description of the property. We have everything set up. Well, this area has not been surveyed since 1856. When California became a state. And so we were looking at a map with, a 150-year-old survey on it. And he says, I don't think you're in the right spot. So I pulled out all my legal description and everything, and I'm pointing out what it is. And we realized that when we got that original description, it was wrong. And when we found out the 80 acres that we did own, it wasn't up there on the hill. It was down here by the river bottom. In fact, we own the 80 acres that had the mesquite tree that we were on like 2 years ago and said this would be the perfect spot for our junior high camp out. We renamed it One Buck because of the miracle of God providing 80 acres for just $1 in exactly the right spot for kind of an outpost camp, in just the right spot for Jeep tours to head down and have a spot where you're out in the middle of nowhere. There's no power, there's no water, there's nothing. There's just a little bit of a shade that we use for some of our meals, a little barbecue pit, a campfire, a little outhouse. God provided $1, 80 acres, just out of the middle of nowhere for us to be able to use here at camp.